Okay, so this one is a little out of the ordinary for me, but I decided to take a gamble and try a little bit of a different story. And so I watched The Disaster Artist, right? The James Franco film. Oh, hi, Mark. And was really enthralled with some of the themes in this story. It really got me thinking about what exactly is a hero and what is a villain. And so this is a theme that we see brought up quite a bit in this film. And it's almost hard to decipher who the hero is. Now, of course, this is a narrative. This is a representation of the story, which is vastly different than what the story itself is. But what I find interesting is this character Tommy really is one of the most absurd characters in the sense of Camus' work, right? I mean, he's so separated from his actions and his truth that is truly absurd. But what makes him fascinating is it's a story at the core about bravery. Maybe, right? I mean, this is a character that is willing to face adversity despite what other people think. And I suppose there's a lesson in never giving up and being true to oneself despite reality. I guess that's what it truly means to be absurd. And then perhaps a lesson in shame, both in the boons and the curses of being free of it. This is a character that is ultimately free from shame for whatever reason. He's a mysterious character, really, in that. And yet again, what makes him this complicated is it's told from the perspective of storytellers. So there's a little bit of obsession with storytelling in and of itself and how actors, producers, and filmmakers see narrative and how they interact. But what I find interesting is that even though everyone sees him as a villain, he desperately wants to be a hero, which is a really sad premise and one that we see. It's a rarer story and narrative because there's an instinct, I think, to not be sympathetic to villains. It's easy to demonize them. But this is a character that desperately wants to be a hero, even though everyone suggests that he just isn't. And he's constantly struggling with cultural diffusion, which is a whole nother topic, right? I mean, this is a character that is very distinctly separated and struggling to understand American culture. And we actually, in how they tell the story, we see him in some ways figure that out. The beginning of the film is him just failing utterly at being able to play catch with a football. And towards the end, where he has this confrontation with Greg, he's actually gained quite a bit of skills, showing some of his greater understanding of the culture he's engaging with. But what he's hoping is that the culture will understand him. And then yet again, the story is asking us, what exactly is madness? And why is it so easy to get caught up in? This is a question we see get brought up a lot in story. I think Dan Harmon does a pretty good job of it, right? In Community, he does a great episode where the dean's trying to make a commercial and everyone gets wrapped up in chaos. And I think that there's sometimes this hope that chaos will bring order. And this returns to a greater theme and theory, which is that order and chaos are in constant odds with one another, or at least they're in a constant dance. I think that the odds might be a bit extreme because they're not necessarily fighting. They're more like lovers in a quarrel. And the harder they fight, the more intimate the makeup tends to be between these two gods of existence. And they tend to engage with each other back and forth. And there's the idea that if we embrace chaos, that perhaps a beautiful order might come out of it. Though that's not necessarily always true. But the more we commit to that chaotic representation, the more there's an instinct to continue with it in hopes that we weren't wrong. It's a doubling down effect that seems very natural in humans. And yet again, he represents this desperate need for connection, loneliness, and fulfillment. And so what I really got consumed with by that is this idea that it's almost impossible to distinguish chaos from order, or at least in terms of creation. And it's a careful balance that both require the two. This is the premise and basis of our universe. Through enough chaos, order comes into being. This is the premise behind the Big Bang and behind most creation mythos. That disorder and chaos incarnate can give way to an orderly creation of beauty. This is the process of art. Art is chaos incarnate turned into order. And I think what's interesting is chaos a lot of times for humans represents pain and suffering. And one of the most natural human instincts is this desire to have our pain be understood. And that's what I really see in the character of Tommy, is this pain and suffering that he so badly wants to be understood and shared. This is not a new premise. I mean, humans for a long time have understood the idea that pain shared is cut in half, right? That we're able to communally connect through mutual suffering, right? This is what makes us tribal. Yet again, another important point in the theory, that our tribal existence is based off of shared suffering. But what happens when our suffering is misunderstood, laughed at, scoffed, and made a joke? That's how we become isolated and separated from the pack. And if our strength is in our numbers and connections and then to have our pain be excommunicated is to be alone. And I think this is an interesting behavior that we see in humans, and why we tend to hold on to ideas even if we know they're wrong, because if they give us community and a sense of belonging in place, then at least we have a pack, which is a natural instinctual drive. And our greatest fear is that our suffering is a joke, and that others won't understand it. And I think that I suppose the idea I'll wrap up with is one of my most favorite artists is that of the comedian. Because I think what makes the comedian interesting is the comedian is someone who is able to understand their suffering completely. Much like the artist, right? The poet is somebody who is able to make their suffering sound beautiful. The comedian is someone that is able to own their suffering and forge connection through it for others, because they are capable of relating with that type of suffering. They're able to breathe life into the pain, though they tend to very much struggle to find that with themselves.